So today on the Late Lunch Show, I'm speaking with a lady on a topic that I've been very keen to talk about for a long, long time. I'm speaking with Eileen Knight, who is a positive psychologist, an integrative counselor, a mental health practitioner, and somebody ultimately with all those facets is there to help people who are going through some challenges, potentially just with their mental health. And hopefully today we're going to talk about what does that all mean. Good afternoon, Eileen. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, really good. Beautiful day today. So yeah, I'm good.
It does put a smile on your face, doesn't it, when it's a day like today?
Absolutely. Yeah, really
So
good.
let's talk about psychology. Let's talk about mental health practitioner, integrative counselor, positive psychologist. If I'm coming at this from the point of view of a person on the street,
Yeah.
you're somebody who helps people when they have some issue with how they're feeling from as a psychological mental health point of view. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, absolutely. So I help people with any crisis, mental health wise, that they feel that they are suffering with. It could be something pretty severe like PTSD, because I work a lot with veterans, or schizophrenia, or it could be something as simple or as lesser, shall I say, not simpler, as anxiety, sadness, maybe a challenge with a relationship, trying to navigate stressful situations, social anxiety. So lots of different, lots of different complex issues that people present with, and each client that comes to see me is completely different, of course.
Now, I think in the past, our general knowledge of this area, mental
Yeah.
health, was pretty basic and quite pretty basic and not very broad. And over the last, I would say, decade or two, more generally, people have become a little bit more comfortable with the term mental health
Yeah.
and a little bit more knowledgeable about the different facets of it. Because, like any health area, physical health, for example, it can be anything from like an issue which is still as important, but doesn't have a detrimental effect on your ability to live everyday
Yeah.
life. To
Yeah.
something that's actually stopping you maybe from even setting outside the house.
Mhm.
It's a broad church mental health, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, like I said, people could just be suffering with, not just, but could be suffering with social anxiety. So even though they're functioning and they're going to work and they're going to, they're going out on social occasions, they might just feel a little bit anxious when they're going out. That they've got those feelings, those butterflies, those, not really 100% confident about doing it, and they want to know why is that? Where's that coming from? What's causing that? And then you'll get like I say, the more debilitating mental health issues like PTSD, depression, where sometimes it's impossible to function, where you're not able to get to work, you're not able to get up in the mornings, and you're finding the whole idea of living very very hard, very tough. And some people like that maybe go into very dark places where they do consider ending their lives, and so mental health is literally that. It's the health of your brain, of your wellness, of your of who you are, your identity.
Eileen, I mean, this has been an aspect of health practice for years and years. I mean, you
Yeah.
go back as long as, but is it now? It seems like we're hearing more about it. It's more prevalent in society.
Yeah.
We're talking more about that. I can't imagine, or maybe it's a question of are we getting more comfortable talking about it, and therefore people are getting more comfortable being overt about it and being public? Or are we finding that the way lives are today, the business of lives, the challenges of lives, the pressure of lives, and everything with it, the internet and everything else, is increasing the number of issues in the different areas of mental health challenge that we've got?
I think it's probably a mixture of the two. You're absolutely right. I think, society as a whole is very challenging at the moment. Young people, there's that famous saying, isn't it? Compare and despair. Most people are, exposed to seeing so much on social media, on the news. Younger people are much more exposed to things that they maybe shouldn't see from a very early age. And you're right, we are talking about it more, but we're also introducing things into society now that actually increase the risk of mental health, that actually exacerbate it. So it is very much, both of them I feel are running alongside together.
We're going to take a break and come back and talk to you a little bit more about that, and talk about how the thing about this topic is it it doesn't it's not selective, is it? You know, it can
No.
happen to anybody at any
Yeah.
time, at any stage. And I want to get on and talk about some of the things that you do that helps people who have challenges with their mental health. It's Rod Maxwell, Lately Lunchtime. Today I'm speaking with Eileen Knight. We're talking about positive psychology, we're talking about integrative counselling, and we're talking about mental health practitioning, if that's a word. And we'll be back with her in a couple of minutes' time. You're listening to the Late Late Lunch Show on Radio Alti, and today I'm delighted, absolutely delighted to be speaking with Eileen Knight. She is somebody who specializes in helping people who, if you want to basically say it, have mental health challenges in their lives. That could be a range of different things, and we're going to come on and talk about that a little bit more and what she does specifically in a few minutes' time. But Eileen, I think that the thing about this topic, and it's just like physical health, you know, somebody having cancer, heart disease, etc., that it doesn't just affect some people at a certain age of their lives or a certain time of their lives or a certain, if you like, economic position. I mean, I go to something called Dandy's Man's Club, and I see people, and I go there with my own issues, and I see people who are very young, men who are very young, talking about the issues they have in life. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying these are mental health issues, but they're issues that they're struggling with. And I see people who are retired who have lots of experience of living and working, and they're suffering from challenges. And I would imagine in the area of mental health that that's exactly the same. It doesn't, what would be the term? It's not selective.
No. No, it's absolutely not. Obviously, there's got to be a circumstance that creates the issue for mental health. There's got to be a trigger, something that causes the person to feel that things are becoming difficult. You know, things are getting out of control. So it can happen to anyone at any stage in their life. As you say, it's definitely not selective. I think today in society, I think there are lots of social issues that affect young men. You know, I do feel there's still a stigma attached to men being able to talk about how they feel, no matter what the age is. That stigma, even though more men, as you say, you know, Andy's club, did you say, you know, more
And
people
Andy's Man Club,
yeah, they're able to talk about it. They go to these places to get that support. But fundamentally, you know, actually dealing with the problems, they tend to internalize it, so it can become very difficult. It can get out of control. And then it gets to a point where they're living it every day, and it almost takes control of them rather than the other way around. And that's when they find it very difficult to manage situations. And like, you know, when you get to retirement age, there's all those thoughts of, well, what now? You know, what's in the future for me? What's going to happen for me? And as a young man, you're trying to navigate, you know, cost of living, you know, this compare and despair where other people seem to be managing life really well and you maybe aren't. You know, like you said, what we're exposed to with social media, you know, trying to raise a family. You know, there's so many different reasons for people to suffer with mental health. And being able to reach out and have those conversations with people can be very difficult.
And is there anything that says, I mean, I'm imagining that the pattern of it in the UK is no different to the Western world or Europe generally, or it may be no different to lots of other countries right across the world. Is it something, are we generally seeing an increase in the number of incidences or the data around mental health challenges, issues? And are we seeing that on a global basis? Is there anything that suggests that the UK is anywhere different to the rest of the world?
I'd probably say that in the Western world, it's probably very similar in most countries. There are probably, again, it's about our definition of happiness, isn't it? You know, what makes us happy? What things in life are we grateful for? Do we love? You know, do we look forward to? You know, in some countries, their ethos would be much simpler. So things that would bring them joy would be much simpler. So maybe the mental health crises aren't as extreme in those countries because they don't have any expectations. Whereas in this country, and certainly in the Western world, we have an expectation of how we should be living, okay, and what we should be achieving, and you know, if we haven't got there, then does that sort of contributes to a crisis that we feel that we're failing somehow, and we're not actually doing as well as everybody else, and that can create then a spiral into mental health. So there are lots of reasons for it, and generally in the Western world, because we're much more materialistic, you know, we want these quick gratifications. It can be extreme here as opposed to other countries that aren't as you know, rigid as that.
We'll take another break, and I want to come back and talk about what are some of the things you do and some of the help that you give people who are struggling with their mental health. And so today, my guest is Eileen Knight. She is what they call a positive psychologist, an integrative counsellor, and a mental health practitioner. We'll get into some of that and talk about some of the ways that she supports people who are having challenges in this part of their life. We'll take a break, back in a couple minutes' time. You listen to Radio Walty. It's Rod Maxwell on the Late Late Lunch Show, and today my guest is Eileen Knight, and she is a lady who works in the area of mental health as a positive psychologist, an integrative counsellor. These are all terms I'm learning today, and generally a mental health practitioner. And I want to talk about a little bit, Eileen, about the sort of support you provide. But I guess what we're seeing, from my own personal experience, having had a brain tumor and basically having what people might colloquially call a breakdown, because my life had shifted from where it was. I was pushed out of my norm, and that was enough to cause me to not know who I was anymore, if you like. And I guess that's the thing. The thing about this is that, you know, somebody can have a broken leg and it can be very similar to the break of somebody else. But mental health seems to me to be much more specific, much more customized to the individual, because the context of your life can have such an influence on it. That means that you can't just treat it generally, I would imagine. You've got to look at the person and their case. Would I be right in that?
Yeah, definitely. So every person who comes, every client who comes to me, they are going to be presenting with different issues, different challenges. But that person has got to that point in their lives, that crisis in their life, for different reasons from the other person or another person. You know, one thing I do want to talk about is, you know, children, when you're growing up and you're exposed to the way your parents raise you. Okay, so you develop a sense of what we call core beliefs. Okay, so you have your core beliefs about life, how you should navigate relationships, how you should be in situations, you know, your attachment styles, etc., etc. So, you know, whatever you've been exposed to as a child, you will carry forward into your adult life. I don't know if you've heard the expression schemas. So a schema is, again, a core belief. It's you know, something like emotional deprivation, or self-sacrifice, punitivism, failure schemas. These are all schemas that we've learned through our exposure to how we've been raised. So those schemas will then interpret how we navigate situations in our lives. You know, if something's presented to us, we will then deal with that, as we've always done, by the schemas and the core beliefs and the rules for living that we've learned. But these core beliefs have come from our parents, okay, which probably came from their parents, and they're not necessarily true. And sometimes a person will get to a point where they can't live with those core beliefs anymore. They can't live with those schemas that they're really detrimental to them and their health, and they're not having successful relationships, and they're not, you know, doing well in work, and they can't seem to hold down a job. So getting to look at what went on with them in the past and how they arrived at this place is very important, to understand how they can then move forward with their lives in a more positive way. Yeah.
See, what I find interesting about that is that people will probably be reasonably comfortable with how an organization defines itself, defines its culture, defines its values, the behaviors that are associated with that, and how you're measured against that, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And that's been part of organizational psychology for decades, if you like. But and it makes absolute sense that actually in a family and in your own life, it should be no different. But it's not something that you often think about, is it?
No,
And
no.
you don't, when you start a family, it's almost like organic in the way that you think about your values. You don't consciously, you've basically inherited what
Yeah.
you had from your parents.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do. I mean, there's that great, can't remember the name of the poet now, but he talks about how, you know, they screw you up, your mum and dad, they don't mean to, but they do. They add you with the faults they had and add some extra just for you. And that's how it goes, you know.
And of course, when you come together as a couple, and whether you're married or not, and you're bringing up a family, you might be coming from two slightly different belief systems, and you may not have actually formed one by the time you're having kids. It's, you know, and again, you're making it up a little bit as you go along, because nobody's ever told you this is what you have to do.
Yeah, yeah. Being a parent doesn't come with any manuals, does it? You have to manage it. But the one thing about children is, up until about the age of 8, their minds are on record. Okay, so they record everything that they see, everything they're exposed to. And it's only after the age of 8, really, that they start to truly implement those beliefs into their ways of being. So if they've witnessed trauma up until the age of 8, you can imagine how their life will then pan out. If a child has been surrounded by wonderful gifts every single day, but has never been read a story or given any love, they might have emotional deprivation. They might feel somehow or other, I need to earn this love from somewhere. How do I do that? You know, how do I gain this love? You know, they might then start to be a people pleaser and do things for other people to try and get some attention. So it's very complex, very complicated, but also very simple. But
it is. Do you know what, Eileen? I often think, you know, we have to do a driving test to get on the roads. There's no test for parenthood, is there?
No.
You're allowed to go forth and multiply and not even do it. I want to take a break and pick up with you again on this, because I think it's really interesting. And of course, it isn't just about young people. It isn't just about parents. I mean, people at all ages are going through different challenges. Whenever your life takes a new turn, a new chapter, whether it's accidental or not, that can often be something that just takes you outside of the norm and can spark a challenge. So I'm delighted to be speaking with Eileen Knight today, a positive psychologist, an integrative counsellor, a mental health practitioner, and an all-round good egg, I feel. And we'll talk to her in a couple of minutes' time. It's Rod Maxwell on Radio LT, and today I'm talking about a subject which is a mild passion of mine, because I've experienced my own challenges around mental health and around my own psychology, and in the last 8 years since I had a brain tumor, and basically my world was turned upside down, and that is one of the things that can spark this, but you know, it's by no means the only thing. And we were just talking, Eileen, about, you know, when you bring up kids, you have that golden window where you can influence, and you're often not consciously thinking about it. It's almost the norms in society, the norms in your life that have an influence, and that can stay with them for some time. But you know, and is that why we're seeing more children going to counseling sessions, for example, now, because they're maybe not as well equipped, or is it because of pressures like social media, and they're always on show, they're always on view, their world, they never get to switch off from the world?
I think again, it's social media plays a huge part. Obviously we're talking about our core beliefs, aren't we? We're talking about how we navigate situations in our life. So if something awful happens to us, as the person that we are, that was created, it's how we respond to those situations that is really important. If a child hasn't built up resilience and a child isn't able to manage situations because they've maybe been very cosseted, or they've been brought up with parents who have constantly said, don't do that, don't do this, you mustn't do that, fill them with fear, then they become very anxious in situations. So when going into big school, as we call it, going to secondary school, can be a pivotal moment in a child's life, when they feel that all of a sudden they're expected to be act in a different way, respond in a different way, and they maybe haven't got the tools to do that when they get to school, because they've been very much protected. I think parents today see too much on social media and tend to Google. We Google everything. We're always looking for solutions. We're always trying to label, and I think that fills people with fear. Everything feels very fearful, and children massively absorb that fear and can present themselves into how they socialize or how they live going forward. But you're right, social media is toxic, and you can't manage that, you can't monitor that. And how do you protect your child from what they see, what they're exposed to?
And of course, as we go through our life, we experience new challenges, new chapters, new opportunities,
Yeah.
but not always are you equipped to do that. And let's go from the extreme of being a child going through school, where just if you are somebody who's heading to retirement, the situation you find yourself post retirement compared to when you're working can be very different. I mean, I know for a fact that, and I've used this analogy before. I felt like I was on the motorway and suddenly was on a B road. Nobody needed me, nobody saw me, etc. And that change, that jolt in your life for anybody can be enough to almost give you too much time to think in your own head.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. Okay, so if we're going to literally break down mental health is all about our thoughts. Okay, so we have something ridiculous like 80,000 thoughts a day, and if we're having the same thoughts over and over again, then we're almost living the same life every day, aren't we? We're living the same thoughts with the same feelings, and then we have the same behavior, so we have the same outcome. So when you get to retirement, you're going to be feeling vulnerable, aren't you? Because you've had this sense of purpose. You might have had a high-powered job. You've felt very important, or you've certainly felt valued. And then all of a sudden, your children have left home, you've retired, you've never really had a chance to develop any new skills, and you're suddenly sitting with these 80,000 thoughts, or these 70,000 thoughts. And these thoughts will then take on an energy of their own, because then you'll start to think, well, what's the point? What purpose do I have? Can I even retrain? And we're quite ageist in this country. Even if you go to the doctor with an ache when you're 60, they'll say, oh, you're getting old, it's your age. My favorite mantra is, age is just a state of mind. Okay, so we can do anything we want to do, and we can be anything we want to be. Age is not going to stop us. But the more people are led to believe that age is a negative thing, they will then spiral into that. I've got no role, I've got no purpose. How can I move forward? What's the point? I'm not even going to get up today. I can't even be bothered to. I've got an ache. The doctor says I'm getting old. And this is how it goes.
And it feels like when you feel a sense of vulnerability, that feels like something that just can get bigger and bigger. It's a bit like a light bulb in a warehouse. Suddenly it becomes a floodlight. And if you allow that to take over, then it takes over your life. You've got to have the tools in your toolbox as to how to deal with that and how to turn it down.
Yeah, so if you have a thought, and that thought every day is, I'm old and I can't do this, and I'm not going to be able to do this, then you are absolutely going to convince yourself that that's the truth. Whereas if you have a thought of nothing's going to stop me, it doesn't matter how old I am, I'm going to embrace life, I'm really grateful, I've got the money here now. So there's always a positive side to looking at the way you view life. It's what you tell yourself. So like you just said, that energy. So a thought is just a thought, okay, it just comes in and out, in and out. But the minute you attach an energy to it or a feeling to it, it becomes something.
And that's I mean that's almost the danger of how retirement has been traditionally defined. It meant stopping, but actually I've found I've never been busier. And actually, I speak to a lot of people who are retired who turn around and say, I never know how I had the time to work. And I believe now that retirement is not about stopping working. It's about shifting your skills and your energy to something new. And often the best thing is to learn a new skill, to learn a new thing. That's good for the mind, it's good for the soul, it's good for your psychology, I guess, at the end of the day.
Absolutely. It's therapy, isn't it? That in itself is therapy, taking up, like you say, a hobby, finding a sport. And also what's very important is the social aspect. So the more you are withdrawn and introverted and become reclusive, the more likely you are to age and become unhappy. But the more you put yourself out there and have those social interactions and meet new people and create new neurons, because remember, our brain is going to be creating new neurons all day, every day, the more we expose it to new things. But again, it's finding the confidence to do that, isn't it?
And actually, I found certainly in my retirement, the things I'm doing now are the things I did as a kid, the things I was encouraged to do, that I was given the opportunity to do, sing in choirs, meet in groups, etc., go walking, you know. And it's quite amazing how you come back to those things that you actually laid the seeds as a child. You know, it's quite. I want to come back and talk about specifically what you do to help people. Ultimately, there are techniques, there are therapies, there are things that can be done. And the good thing is we do talk about this more, and that's what this session's all about. My guest today is Eileen Knight. She is a positive psychologist. She's an integrative counselor. She's a mental health practitioner. And she's talking to us here in the Late Late Lunch Show. We'll find out more how she helps people to overcome some of these challenges. We'll be back in a couple of minutes' time. You listen to the Late Late Lunch Show. It's Rod Maxwell on Radio All Day, and I love this topic. I know that there's a lot of people with a lot of challenges with mental health, but I think we all need to get out there and talk a little bit more about it. And I'm delighted that Eileen Knight, who works in this area, is with me. Eileen, you see, that's the thing about modern life today, isn't it? There's the yin and the yang. The yin is we are talking about it more. People are talking about their mental health more. They're being more open about it. But at the same time, there are more channels. There's more blurb. There's more content that can actually not destroy, but damage your mental health. The internet, not just the internet, because it isn't just the internet, but there are so many more darker forces. And it almost feels like it's a battle between the good and the bad, isn't it?
I think most human beings are predisposed to focusing on the negative, and disqualifying the positive. And, I'll use COVID as an example, but when COVID happened, the news was on a 24-hour loop, and it was showing the extremes of everything, and it was filling people with fear. And a lot of people became very, very unwell and haven't really recovered from that experience, because when you are fearful, you automatically go into survival, don't you? You go into your survival mode, and that survival is when you're filled with adrenaline and cortisol, and you are preparing yourself for that fight or flight. But that's very unhealthy, because your body can't stay in that state. But getting yourself out of that, once you've convinced yourself you're in it, that's when the problems start. So most thoughts, like we said before, are memorized or habitual. Okay, so we go to the same thoughts every day with the same feelings, which leads to the same behavior and the same outcome. And people only have to see one news item or read something on a chat page, or see something on a WhatsApp group, and straight away it will send them to that place of fear and panic and and, you know, feeling vulnerable. So to break that cycle, we have to look at what starts it, and it would be your thought. Okay, so it'll be your thoughts linked to that feeling you've created, memorized, and then that, you know, change the outcome. And it sounds simple, but it takes practice, because to get yourself, you're almost reprogramming your brain, because you've programmed it one way. Okay, now you realize that's not working for you. It's not helpful. You know, these feelings of fear, depression, sadness, anger, you know, irritation, unhappiness, they're not working. So you then now need to reprogram your brain to behave differently, to have different thoughts, to focus more on the positive and the negative, which we're all able to do, aren't we? Because there is a choice, isn't there? There's a choice between a positive and a negative. It's what you choose as a person instinctively that, you know, applies to the way you live your life.
So for people that come to you for help, I guess based on what you said there, the first thing you've got to identify is what's that trigger, what's that thing in their mind that takes them to a place that's darker than they really should be or want to be.
So we would look at, you know, we would look at your thoughts, and we'd put the thoughts on trial, if you like. Okay, so we'd look for the evidence. Where's the evidence that this thought that you're having is true? Show me the evidence that supports that this thought is true, because what you will find is it will be what we call a cognitive distortion, okay, based again on your core beliefs. Okay, so it will be based on how you have trained yourself to be, how you have memorized and habitually become this belief system. So when we look at your thoughts and we start to say, well, actually, that thought, you know, that's an assumption, isn't it? Because you're not a mind reader. You can't, you know, an example would be everybody doesn't like me in work. They think I'm a failure. Okay. And then I say, okay, so where's your evidence? Because you can't read their minds. You're not a mind reader. You're not a fortune teller. So can you please show me the evidence? So like I say, putting your thoughts on trial, which sounds very simple, and it is very simple, but it's very effective, because once a person starts to realize that actually I'm doing this all the time, I'm having these thoughts, and actually they're not true. They're not even real. It's what I've created. It's my assumptions. Then they will change them.
And why do we seem to spend more negative energy than positive energy on this? Why are we possessed or are positioned to think in that way? Because I know I am, right? I my world's worst critic, and you know, I look and think I'm getting that wrong or whatever it is. It's why do we do that?
We do it because we've taught ourselves to do it. We've trained ourselves to do it. We've programmed ourselves to do it because it feels comfortable. Okay, feels more comfortable to have that same belief system every day. So if I said to you tomorrow, Rod, you need to not say one bad thing about anybody, not say one negative thing about anybody. So when you wake up in the morning, find 5 things that you're grateful for and start your day that way, and then build from there. And what's really, because I do this a lot, because I absolutely practice what I preach. And so when I wake up in the morning, I do practice my gratitude, but I make a point of saying hello to everyone. I make a point of hugging people. I make a point of showing, someone will say to me, oh, this weather's too hot. And I'll say, but isn't it absolutely beautiful? Or have you looked at the sky lately, or something positive? And people think I'm odd. Okay, so they think I'm a bit weird. And that's the thing, isn't it? Because most people would rather say, isn't it miserable? Look at the weather, the news. Have you seen that? So I've also had a news blackout. I don't watch the news. I haven't watched the news for 5 years. Really? I don't watch any news now, because it doesn't serve a purpose for me, because I would be exposing myself to, I intentionally bring into my life the things that absolutely make me happy.
You see, well, I'm really interested in what you just said there, because when I was working, I had the professional me, and the professional me had to put on a certain act and slap a smile on and that type of thing. And you would, no matter how you were feeling in the morning, or even if you were walking into meeting and you thought, I don't know anything about what we're going to talk about, but I've got to just fake it to make it. You did it, right? I feel now I have probably got a little bit lax, a little bit lacking discipline, that in not working, I don't feel I need to do that anymore.
Okay.
And actually, people just have to take me as I am, right?
Okay.
And that honesty probably means that I've got a little bit tardy, a little bit, a little bit lazy in having positive mental feelings.
Hmm.
And even down to, I know a small thing. I don't shave all the time, right?
Okay.
And then I shaved the other day, and somebody turned around and said, "My God, you look so much younger," you know.
Okay.
And I was thinking, well, that probably applies to my brain and my mental health as much as it does my physical appearance. And it is about some disciplines, isn't it? Really, what you're talking about?
Yeah. So it's just changing, isn't it? And change is always fearful, isn't it? People find even when they're living lives that they don't even like, it's their familiar way of being. Okay. So that's what they're used to doing and used to being. And then getting someone, and then they wonder why they're not happy and why life isn't changing. So most people will want to change and then they'll start to change, but then that little voice will come in, oh, start tomorrow, do it tomorrow. You don't need to do it today. You can't do it anyway. So don't even try doing it. So they'll go back to the familiar. To create a more positive mental health in ourselves, we have to fully look at the things in life that are making us unhappy and try to change those things, because we are able to change. Everyone can create the lives that they absolutely love, but it might require, so nothing changes in life if nothing changes.
It's that classic mantra, isn't
But
it?
it's
Uh,
I have that
it's
in
so
my
true.
counseling room, and it's so true.
We'll take another break and come back, and because this is a fascinating conversation with Eileen Knight. We're talking about mental health. We're talking about positive psychology, and I think I get the positive psychologist bit now. Is you have to basically focus on the positive. So we'll take a break. We'll come back more positively than ever after this track. It's Rod Maxwell on Radio Ulti, and I feel like I'm in a session, a psychology session. I feel like I'm getting real benefit out of this, and I guess I'm here with Eileen Knight. She's a positive psychologist, an integrative counselor, mental health practitioner, and I'm sensing. I can tell from our conversation that the process you go through with somebody is they've got to put everything out on the table. First of all, you've got to know what you're
Mm-hmm.
working on. So they've got to pour out what is on their minds. And what you're trying to do is just get that chimp to focus on the positive and try to stay away from the negative. So you mentioned about, things like when you start in the morning, start with 5 positive things or whatever it is. Is it building those routines into your day a little bit to train your mind, if you like, Annie?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, it's not that using that term, trying to focus on the positive. Of course, that's very, very, very difficult if you've had a life of trauma. Okay, and I certainly don't want to diminish or dismiss that people do have and do go through the most horrendous things in their lives. And asking someone to say, oh, just think positively, that sounds like you're completely not understanding just how deep that trauma goes.
Mm.
And that certainly isn't what I do. When someone comes into my counseling room, it's their safe space, so they're able to talk about anything they want to talk about and bring anything into that room without judgment. They'll get my total belief in them and understanding of what they're going through. But for them to be able to then create a life that they love and break out free of that cycle of trauma, because although the trauma happened to them, it did happen in the past. So we need to move away from that past and stop bringing that past into our present. Okay, so one thing I would say for you and me now, Rob, is that we are in the only reality of mine in your life at the moment is this moment you and I are in. Okay, this is our only real life. And anything that happens later on, it's predictive future. Anything that happened yesterday is the past. So it's getting people to understand that they need to be mindful of the generous present moment. So the moment that they're in, okay, because that's the only reality of their life. And if we focus too much on the past and keep bringing it into our present, then every day is going to be the same. Nothing is going to change.
If so, that mindfulness, and that is a term is used an awful lot in this area. Is that as simple as if you're out for a walk, just feeling the air, if you like, or just even the way you're breathing, just being and focusing on that as a simple positive of what the day is about.
Yeah. So like I said before, you're looking at the sky. People don't look up anymore. People don't look at buildings. They don't look at the person that they're with and talk to them face to face. They don't look in someone else's eyes, or they don't pick up on signals. People seem to be more determined to stay in with their phones to their faces, or looking on TV, or focusing on the negatives. People aren't aware that the world is beautiful. It's, being alive in that moment is so important, and just being grateful for that present moment, because it is the only reality of our lives. But positive psychology is more about getting people to focus on the wonderful parts of their lives, rather than what happened in the past and how damaging that was, because no one, as I said, is going to diminish that or dismiss that, because it's brought you to where you are now. But getting an understanding of, you don't need to be stuck with that. You don't need to be stuck in the past. You can create a better way of living, a more healthy way of living, a more happier way of living, a more focused way of living, and create a wonderful, positive outcome for you going forward.
So would it be fair to say that part of what you do with people, the counseling, the support you offer, is to help them find little things in their day, in their lives, that give them some sort of positive, right? So that could be as simple as, a hello, saying hello to somebody as you walk past them. But and I don't want to break. It's not as simple, because this is I guess the problem is there's a range of different issues. But no two people are going to be the same.
No.
And you have to treat the individual, but sometimes it can be a very practical response to what, and something that they can really own and do for themselves, as opposed to needing, a very complicated therapy. Sometimes it can be simple little injections into their lives, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so if you imagine, if you wake up in the morning, you're feeling really depressed, you're feeling really low, you're feeling really overwhelmed with life, very anxious, and you pick up, the first thing you do in the morning when you wake up is you pick up and you look at the news on your phone. You haven't even got out of bed yet. So the first thing you see is a plane has crashed, or you see we're going to go to war, or you see something. So immediately that sets the tone for your day. Okay, you are immediately thrown into that place of fear, anxiety, stress. It's compounding all those feelings that you have, those negative feelings that you have. So if you decide, tomorrow morning, I'm not going to pick up my phone, I'm going to do something different tomorrow morning, that changes the beginning of my day. That starts me off differently. So I'm not doing that same habitual, memorized way of being. I'm not creating those same 80,000 thoughts. I'm going to create different thoughts. I'm going to start off my day in a different way. So instead of picking up your phone, you go downstairs, you go in the garden, you make yourself a cup of tea, you go in the garden, you sit in the sunshine. And you have your cup of tea and you look at the sky and you think, I'm so grateful for my family, my loved ones, my garden, my house, finding things that you can focus on that are more beneficial to you than focusing on the news and disasters and energy. So we're all about energy, aren't we? Our bodies, we are energy. And the more we can give out positive energy, the more we are going to reciprocate that. We're going to absorb it. Does that make sense?
This point about mindfulness is that you want people to invest, to properly think about that moment. So if it is just sitting in the garden, listening to the birds, instead of watching the news, it's just giving your all to it, not allowing any other distractions in, and just being very mindful, being very conscious of what you're doing at that time. That's what we're talking about here.
So yeah, it's sort of like being in, like I said, in the present moment. So bringing your awareness back into the moment that you're in, rather than trying to catastrophize about what's going to happen this afternoon, what's going to happen in a meeting, trying to predict a future that you don't know, which can bring a lot of anxiety, or hurtling yourself back into the past of, that this happened to me 5 years ago, but you're still carrying it around with you. It's still making you stuck in this, in this way of being. So if you keep bringing yourself back into the present moment, you're able to just enjoy that moment for what it is, and you get a greater understanding of how you can develop a sense of peace and a sense of calm. Yeah.
And I guess, I mean, coming back to the point you made earlier, there are people who've got very complex,
Yeah.
sophisticated challenges when it comes to their mental health.
Yeah.
All these things will always apply to them, or wouldn't be apply so easy. But I guess the principle might be something of the same. If somebody who is afraid of leaving the house, that first step might be just opening the door, perhaps. I don't know. Is that what it might be?
Yeah. So, I have clients with very complex OCD, complex PTSD, hypervigilance, they're not able to. So the therapy I would use with them would be what we call exposure therapy. So we would be exposing them to the fears that they have, exposing them and looking again at the thoughts. So people with OCD tend to have very intrusive thoughts. Okay, and those intrusive thoughts again are memorized, and they've made it part of their belief. They're habitual. And again, I'm not diminishing or dismissing any of those. They can be very harmful to the person. So it's getting us to look at those intrusive thoughts, where they've actually come from, and then how they can, if you like, discount them. So in other words, look for the truth. So if I don't wash my hands 1,000 times a day, I'm not going to be able to, something bad's going to happen to my mom, or something bad's going to happen to me. So again, we're looking at those thoughts, and we're looking at finding the truth, and then exposing them to doing things that would ordinarily create what they think would be an outcome, and then they discover that outcome doesn't happen. So that gives them the confidence to change.
It must be a fascinating area to work in, Eileen. It must be very
it really is. I'm very, again, that I'll use that word grateful, but I am very, very grateful that I've, happened to come into this, this area of working a little bit later in life than probably most people. But I absolutely love what I do every single day, and I see dramatic changes in people, which is wonderful, and that's the reason I do it.
Well, look, that feels like a good place to end. We could talk all day about this. It is a fascinating topic, but hopefully we've at least broken down some of the what would you call it, the stigma
Barriers.
and
Yes,
some of the
stigma.
barriers of it, and just and a little bit of an insight as to the sort of things that can be done, and the help that's out there. Eileen, if anybody wants to get in contact with you or follow you or whatever, what's the best way to do it?
Okay, so I think I said to you, I'm not really good at going on social media and stuff, because I tend not to do that. But I support people in Ormskirk Chiropractic Centre, which is in Ormskirk, and I work with the central nervous system and spinal screenings. I do emotional work for them. I support their clients there. But I mean, you can always contact me if people want to email me, or I'm happy for you to give out my number if you want to, at the end, where they can contact me personally for my own private practice. And if they want to do that. But Ormskirk Chiropractic Centre is where you would definitely be able to get me, and that's in Ormskirk, obviously.
And in front of me on the screen, I've got the counselling directory. It's
yeah, I'm on the counselling directory, and I'm also on the BACP. I'm a registered counsellor on there.
So if you're ever looking for a bit of support, and you think Eileen might be the person, look up the counselling directory, Eileen Knight with a K, and if you go with counsellor there, I think that's how I found it. You will find all our details. It's been superb. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
And maybe we'll talk again.
Yeah, hopefully.